The HOA president's shriek pierced the Texas evening as she demanded my arrest on my own property. After driving 12 hours to my family ranch, I was greeted by police lights and a blonde woman claiming I was trespassing. She stood there smirking, certain of victory. What this small-town tyrant didn't know. My office wall in Washington displays photos of 300 HOA presidents I've personally sent to federal prison. If you're watching from your own HOA nightmare, comment your location below, because this woman just made the biggest mistake of her life. Follow my story to the end. Nathan Hayes had driven 12 hours straight from Washington, D.C., his shoulders aching from hunching over the steering wheel, his eyes burning from the endless stretch of highway. The familiar sight of the wooden fence his grandfather built should have been a relief. Instead, red and blue lights painted it in alternating flashes of official trouble. The patrol car sat diagonal across his driveway, blocking any escape route. Not that Nathan planned to run. He'd spent 15 years dealing with law enforcement at every level. He knew better than to make sudden movements or reach for anything without permission. Two officers approached his truck with the measured caution reserved for potentially dangerous suspects. Their hands hovered near their service weapons flashlights, sweeping across his face in practiced patterns. "Sir, step out of the vehicle slowly," the younger officer commanded. His nameplate read Martinez. Fresh out of the academy, Nathan guessed based on the textbook stance and overly formal tone. Nathan complied, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. The gravel crunched under his boots as he stood, hands slightly raised. "Officers, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is my family's property. We received a report of breaking and entering," Officer Rodriguez, the senior partner, explained. His weathered face suggested decades of small-town policing. "Going to need to see some identification." Before Nathan could respond, the click of heels on pavement announced a new arrival. The woman who emerged from the shadows moved with the practiced confidence of someone who'd orchestrated this exact scenario dozens of times before. Margaret Williams stood 5'6", in sensible pumps, her blonde hair styled in what Nathan's grandmother would have called a helmet cut, impervious to wind weather or shame. Her pantsuit looked expensive, but not flashy, the uniform of small-town authority. The HOA president badge on her lapel caught the patrol car's lights. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly." Her voice carried the honeyed poison of Southern politeness weaponized. "As I explained on the phone, this man is trespassing on HOA-controlled property." Nathan watched her performance with professional interest. She'd positioned herself perfectly close enough to seem involved, but far enough to avoid any potential confrontation. Classic power play. "Ma'am, this gentleman claims to own this property," Rodriguez said, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Margaret's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "I'm sure many criminals claim to own the homes they're robbing. I've been HOA president here for 15 years. I know every resident, every property owner, every single person who belongs in Willowbrook Ranch." She turned to Nathan, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "And I've never seen this man before in my life." "The name's Nathan Hayes," he said evenly. "My grandfather was William Hayes. He bought this land in 1947. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes at the mention of his grandfather's name. Not surprised she'd known exactly who he was the moment his truck turned into the driveway. This was calculated, planned, personal. Hayes. She tapped her chin in mock contemplation. "Oh yes, the old hermit who died 5 years ago. But that doesn't explain who you are or why you're here after dark violating curfew." "Curfew?" Nathan couldn't help the incredulous laugh. "This is private property, Texas, not a military base." "Officer Rodriguez." Margaret's voice sharpened. "Willowbrook Ranch HOA has strict regulations about property access after 9 p.m., for community safety, of course. Even if this man has some distant connection to the previous owner, he's still in violation." Rodriguez shifted his weight, the leather of his duty belt creaking. "Sir, can you prove you own this property?" Nathan slowly reached for his phone, noting how Martinez's hand drifted toward his weapon. "I have digital copies of the deed right here." The documents loaded quickly despite the rural cell service. Nathan had learned long ago to keep everything backed up in multiple formats. When you spent your career untangling property disputes, and HOA corruption, paranoia became preparation. Rodriguez examined the phone screen using his own flashlight to read the details. His expression shifted from suspicious to apologetic. This all appears to be in order, Mr. Hayes. The property is clearly listed in your name, transferred after your father's death 5 years ago. This is ridiculous, Margaret interjected. Those could be forgeries. With modern technology, anyone can fake documents. Ma'am, Rodriguez's tone carried the weight of a man who'd reached his limit of nonsense for the evening. Unless you have evidence of forgery or a court order stating otherwise, Mr. Hayes has every right to be on his property. Margaret stepped closer to Nathan, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating. There have been questions about the legitimacy of the Hayes property claims, boundary disputes, survey discrepancies. Perhaps Mr. Hayes isn't aware he's actually standing on HOA common area. That's a civil matter, Rodriguez said firmly. Without clear evidence of criminal trespass, we're done here. He turned to Nathan. Welcome home, Mr. Hayes. Sorry for the trouble. The officers returned to their patrol car, leaving Nathan and Margaret in the sudden darkness. The only light came from his truck's headlights, still pointing at the house he'd grown up in, the house his grandfather had built with his own hands. Margaret waited until the patrol car's taillights disappeared down the road before dropping her mask completely. 20 years, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. 20 years I've waited for this moment. Nathan said nothing, letting her reveal herself. In his experience, the best interrogation technique was silence. People couldn't help feeling it, especially when emotion overrode logic. Your grandfather destroyed my family. She moved closer, her face twisted with old rage. We had plans for this land, a resort that would have transformed this backwater into something special. My father had investors lined up, permits ready, everything arranged. Then William Hayes decided to play hero. The pieces clicked into place. Nathan remembered his grandfather mentioning something about developers sniffing around in the early 2000s trying to buy up land for commercialization. William had rallied the old-timers, the original ranchers, who'd settled the area after the war. They'd fought the development at every turn using county commissioners, environmental regulations, and good old-fashioned stubbornness. He turned the whole county against us, Margaret continued. My father lost everything, his business, his reputation, his will to live. He died broken and humiliated, all because William Hayes couldn't stand to see progress. Progress, Nathan repeated. That's what you call forcing people off their land. Margaret's smile returned cold and calculated. Your family's had their time. Now it's mine. You have 72 hours to reconsider your position here. I'd suggest you use them wisely. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The Willowbrook Ranch HOA has extensive powers to protect property values and community standards. Your grandfather may have found some loopholes to avoid our oversight, but those died with him. Every single thing on this property will be measured, documented, and cited, if it's even a millimeter out of compliance. She turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Nathan. Yes, I know exactly who you are. What you do in Washington. But this isn't the capital. This is Texas. My Texas. Your little government job won't help you here. We'll see about that, Nathan said quietly. Margaret laughed. Yes, we will. 72 hours. I'd start packing if I were you. She walked back to her golf cart, of course she had a golf cart, and drove away, leaving Nathan standing in his own driveway processing what had just happened. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Elena Martinez, a lawyer who'd helped him with dozens of cases over the years. Nathan. She answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Aren't you supposed to be on vacation? Vacation's over. I need you to pull everything you can find on the Willowbrook Ranch HOA and a woman named Margaret Williams. What happened? Nathan looked at his grandfather's house, dark and waiting. Someone just declared war. And she has no idea who she's fighting. The morning arrived with the kind of aggressive cheerfulness that only spite could generate. Nathan stood on his porch at exactly 7:00 a.m., coffee in hand, to find his entire front yard had been transformed into a sea of orange violation notices. They fluttered in the morning breeze like toxic butterflies. 47 violations. He counted them twice, partly because his pre-caffeine brain struggled to process the sheer audacity, and partly because he wanted to document the exact number for the lawsuit he was already planning. Each notice was meticulously filled out in Margaret's cramped handwriting, time-stamped at various points throughout the night. The woman had apparently spent hours crawling around his property with a measuring tape and a flashlight documenting every possible infraction. Grass height exceeds HOA maximum by 0.5 inches. The grass that hadn't been cut because he'd literally just arrived. Mailbox color does not match approved palette. The mailbox his grandfather had installed in 1973. Fence posts exceed regulation height by 1.2 inches. The fence that predated the HOA by 2 decades. The most absurd one made him laugh out loud. Visible coffee mug on porch violates outdoor beverage container guidelines. Fine, $300. He photographed each notice, making sure to capture the timestamps. Margaret had been on his property at 2:17 a.m., 3:43 a.m., 4:55 a.m. Either she had insomnia or she was trying to send a message. Probably both. The last envelope was different. Personal stationery, not an HOA form. His name written in fountain pen. Inside Margaret's message was brief but loaded with threat. Mr. Hayes, I trust you've received our welcome package. The Willowbrook Ranch HOA takes property standards very seriously. Your grandfather's exemptions expired with him. You have 68 hours remaining. I have buyers ready to pay above market value. Cash offer. No contingencies. Save yourself the legal fees and humiliation. M. Williams. P.S. Judge Harrison sends his regards. Judge Harrison. Nathan knew that name. He'd appeared in 3 separate corruption investigations, always peripheral, never quite dirty enough to prosecute. If Margaret had him in her pocket, this was bigger than a personal vendetta. A movement at the fence line caught his attention. Linda Thompson, the neighbor to the east, was trying to get his attention while simultaneously checking over her shoulder like a spy in a bad movie. Nathan walked over, keeping his movements casual. No need to give Margaret surveillance, and he was certain she had cameras somewhere, any more ammunition. You are, Mr. Hayes. Linda's voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm sorry to bother you, but I saw the notices and I had to warn you. She was mid-60s, gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing gardening clothes that had seen better decades. Her hands shook slightly as she pushed a thick folder through the fence. I've been documenting everything for 2 years, she said. Margaret's not just mean, she's systematically destroying this community. Nathan opened the folder. Inside were copies of hundreds of violations, photographs of damaged property, and a spreadsheet that would make an auditor weep with joy. She targets anyone who opposes her, Linda explained. Tom Bradley lost his house last year. 30 years he'd lived there. She hit him with so many fines over a bird feeder, that he couldn't pay his mortgage. Why didn't anyone fight back? Linda's laugh was bitter. With what Judge Harrison is her cousin-in-law. The county commissioners are all development people she helped get elected. The sheriff's department won't touch HOA disputes, and anyone who tries to organize opposition has accidents. Accidents. Pets disappear, cars get vandalized, gardens die overnight. She glanced at his grandmother's rose garden, still blooming despite 5 years of minimal care. Those roses are beautiful. Your grandmother gave me cuttings once. It'd be a shame if something happened to them. The threat implicit in her warning made Nathan's blood run cold. Not from Linda, she was clearly trying to help, but from what it implied about Margaret's methods. Has anyone contacted state authorities, the Attorney General? Tom Bradley tried. His complaint got lost. Then his dog disappeared. Then his wife had a fall down some stairs that left her in a wheelchair. He stopped complaining after that. Nathan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw you talking to the Thompson woman. Nosy neighbors tend to have accidents. 67 hours left. He showed the message to Linda. Her face paled. I should go, she said quickly, but please be careful. Margaret's dangerous and she has help. As Linda hurried back to her house, Nathan noticed a golf cart parked at the corner, partially hidden behind a cluster of mailboxes. The driver was pretending to check their phone, but the angle of their cap couldn't hide that they were watching him. Nathan waved cheerfully at the spy, then went inside to make some calls. His first was to his boss in Washington, Director Davidson, a man who'd seen every form of HOA corruption imaginable. Nathan, You're supposed to be on vacation, Davidson said by way of greeting. It's turned into a working vacation. I need you to pull everything we have on Judge Randall Harrison in Texas. Also a woman named Margaret Williams, president of the Willowbrook Ranch HOA. What have you stumbled into? Either a massive coincidence or a criminal conspiracy. Possibly both. Davidson's keyboard clacked in the background. Harrison's name has come up before. 3 investigations never charged. Always seemed to know when we were looking. And Williams? Holy hell, Nathan. What? She's connected to 7 different HOA-related property transfers in the last 5 years. All of them forced sales due to excessive violations. All of them sold to the same 3 development companies. Want to guess who owns those companies? Judge Harrison? His wife, actually, but close enough. Nathan felt the familiar tingle of a case coming together. Can you send me everything? Already uploading. Nathan, if this is what it looks like you're talking about organized crime, maybe you should... What, leave, let them drive another family off their land? Davidson sighed. I was going to say be careful, but we both know you won't. After hanging up, Nathan spent the rest of the morning setting up his defense. He installed security cameras, small ones that uploaded directly to cloud storage. He documented the current state of every single thing Margaret had cited with photographs and measurements proving her violations were fabricated. At noon exactly, Margaret appeared in another golf cart, this one with official HOA markings. She was dressed in what Nathan was starting to think of as her uniform-pressed khakis. HOA polo shirt and a visor that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Mr. Hayes, she called out, not bothering to leave the cart. I see you're documenting your violations. How thorough. Though I should mention that any corrections require approval from the Architectural Committee. The next meeting is in 6 weeks. After your 72-hour deadline. Oh, that's for you to vacate. The committee meeting would be for the new owners to get approval for changes. Nathan walked closer, noting how her hand moved to her phone, probably ready to call her tame cops again. Margaret, what really happened between you and my grandfather? Her composure cracked slightly. He destroyed my father. Isn't that enough? Your father tried to steal people's land for a development that would have ruined the water table. My grandfather organized legal opposition. That's not destruction, that's democracy. Margaret's face flushed red. Legal? Your grandfather paid off inspectors, bribed commissioners, threatened investors. He was a criminal who hid behind folksy charm and good old boy connections. That's interesting, because I have all his papers and there's nothing about bribes or threats, just a lot of documented environmental concerns and community petitions. Papers can be destroyed, edited. Your family was always good at covering tracks. She leaned forward, but not good enough. Your father found that out. What's that supposed to mean? Heart disease runs in your family, doesn't it? Your grandfather, your father? Weak hearts, prone to giving out under stress. Her smile was poison. You should be careful about your stress levels, Nathan. This kind of conflict can be very taxing on the cardiovascular system. The casual cruelty of the threat, the implication about his father's death 5 years ago, made Nathan's hands clench into fists. He forced himself to remain calm. Are you threatening me, Margaret? I'm expressing concern for your health. After all, we wouldn't want another Hayes man to drop dead from a heart attack, would we? Your father was, 58, so young. But then he was always fighting battles he couldn't win. Nathan's phone recorded everything, the audio crystal clear. Margaret didn't know it, but she'd just given him evidence of threatening behavior. I'll take my chances, he said evenly. 66 hours, Margaret replied, driving away. That afternoon, Nathan decided to test Margaret's surveillance network. He made a show of measuring his fence posts using a level and tape measure, making notes in a visible notebook. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, another golf cart appeared. This time, it was Robert Williams, Margaret's husband. Where Margaret was sharp angles and aggressive energy, Robert was soft edges and defeated posture. He looked like a man who'd given up fighting years ago. Mr. Hayes, Robert said, his voice lacking any real authority. I need to inform you that any modifications to existing structures require permits and HOA approval. I'm not modifying anything. I'm documenting that your wife's measurements are wrong. Robert's shoulders sagged further. They're not wrong. You haven't even looked. Doesn't matter. Margaret's measurements are never wrong, even when they are. There was something in his tone of bitter exhaustion that made Nathan look closer at the man. Robert had the look of someone trapped going through motions he'd long since stopped believing in. "How long have you been married?" Nathan asked. 23 years. Robert said it like a prison sentence. Must be tough being married to someone so dedicated to their work. Robert laughed short and bitter. Dedicated. That's one word for it. What would be another? Robert looked around nervously, then leaned closer. You seem like a decent guy. Take the money and run. It's not worth it. Did Tom Bradley get that advice? Robert flinched. Tom was stubborn. What happened to his dog? I don't know anything about that. But you know something happened to it. Robert started backing away. I need to go. Margaret will want to report. Robert, if you ever want to talk. I don't. 65 hours, Mr. Hayes. Please just take the offer. As Robert drove away, Nathan noticed something interesting. 3 other golf carts had positioned themselves at various corners, their drivers all watching his property. Margaret had a network of informants, probably other HOA board members or residents she'd converted to her cause through fear or favor. That evening, Nathan sat on his grandfather's porch going through the documents Davidson had sent. The pattern was clear and damning. Over 7 years, Margaret had driven out 23 families. Each property had been sold to one of Harrison's shell companies, then flipped to developers for massive profits. The total take was in the millions. This wasn't just HOA overreach, it was racketeering. His phone rang. Elena Martinez. Nathan, I've been researching all day. This is huge, Rico, huge. If we can prove the pattern, show the connections between Margaret and Harrison, demonstrate the systematic nature of the scheme. We need a whistleblower, Nathan interrupted. Someone inside who'll testify. What about the husband, Robert? Maybe. He's broken enough. But I need leverage. You mean besides the federal prison time he's looking at for conspiracy? That assumes we can prove conspiracy. Right now, all we have is circumstantial evidence and pattern recognition. Elena was quiet for a moment. What about the other victims, the families who were forced out? Linda Thompson is documenting what she can, but people are scared. Tom Bradley's wife is in a wheelchair after a suspicious fall. These people have been traumatized. Then we need something dramatic, something that forces the authorities to pay attention. Nathan watched the sun set over his grandfather's land, the same view William Hayes had watched for 50 years. I might have an idea, but I'll need Margaret to escalate first. That sounds dangerous. She's already made threats about my father's death. If she's willing to hint at murder, she might be willing to do something stupid enough to hang herself. Nathan. I've got cameras everywhere. Everything's being uploaded to cloud storage. If something happens to me, you'll have all the evidence you need. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be effective. After hanging up, Nathan walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time since arriving. His grandfather's presence was everywhere in the handmade furniture, the photographs on the walls, the books on the shelves. This wasn't just property, it was legacy. In his grandfather's study, he found boxes of papers he'd never gone through after the funeral. His father had been too grief-stricken, and Nathan had been too busy with work. Now he wondered what secrets they might contain. The first box was routine tax documents, receipts, correspondence with lawyers about the will. The second box was more interesting. Letters from neighbors thanking William for his help, newspaper clippings about the development fight, photographs of community meetings. In the third box, he found gold. A letter from Margaret's father, David Thompson, dated 6 months before his death. The handwriting was shaky, the words rambling, but the content was explosive. William, I know what you think of me, and you're right. I got greedy. I let ambition blind me to what really mattered. But Margaret doesn't understand that. She thinks you destroyed us out of spite. She doesn't know that I was already in trouble, that the mob connections were closing in, that your opposition actually saved me from federal prison. She's dangerous, William, more dangerous than I ever was. She's smart, patient, and completely without conscience. I've created a monster, and I don't know how to stop her. If something happens to me, it won't be the cancer. Watch your back, watch your family's backs. She's already talking about the long game, about waiting until you're gone to take what she thinks we deserve. I'm sorry for everything. David. Nathan photographed the letter, sent copies to Elena and Davidson. This changed everything. Margaret's father had been involved with organized crime. The development wasn't just about money, it was about money laundering. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Enjoying your reading, your grandfather kept such interesting papers. Be a shame if there was a fire. 60 hours left. Nathan looked at the security camera he'd installed in the study. The red recording light blinked steadily. If Margaret tried anything, he'd have her on video. He spent the rest of the night going through papers, finding more evidence of the original development scheme. His grandfather had been meticulous, keeping records of every interaction, every threat, every attempted bribe. By 3 a.m., Nathan had assembled a timeline that showed clear criminal intent dating back 20 years. The current scheme was just the evolution of the original plan adapted for modern times, with HOA regulations as the weapon instead of mob intimidation. He was so absorbed in the documents that he almost missed the sound, a soft splashing from outside barely audible through the window. Nathan crept to the window, staying in the shadows. In the moonlight, he could see a figure in dark clothes spraying something on his grandmother's rose garden. The chemical smell drifted through the cracked window, herbicide industrial strength. He grabbed his phone, activating the camera, zooming in on the figure. The person turned slightly, and the moonlight caught their profile. Robert Williams. But Robert wasn't alone. Margaret's voice carried on the still night air, tinny through his phone speaker. Make sure you get all the old roses. The new ones can stay. We need to show selective damage, not random vandalism. And Robert, wear the shoes I left out. They're 2 sizes bigger than yours. Nathan recorded everything, his hands steady despite his rage. They were destroying his grandmother's roses, the ones she'd brought from Ireland, nurtured for decades. But they were also giving him exactly what he needed, evidence of deliberate planned vandalism. Nathan waited until Robert finished poisoning the roses before making his move. He needed the complete crime on video, every deliberate action, every instruction from Margaret through the phone. The herbicide's acrid smell grew stronger as Robert moved methodically through the garden, targeting only the heritage roses with surgical precision. When Robert finally left, Nathan remained at the window for another hour, making sure no one else was coming. Then he grabbed sample containers from his truck. He always kept an evidence kit, a habit from years of investigations, and collected soil samples from around the murdered roses. Dawn was breaking when Sheriff Deputy Chen arrived to take the report. Chen was young, Asian, ambitious, the kind of officer who joined law enforcement to make a difference, not yet beaten down by small-town politics. Mr. Hayes, I understand you're upset, but without evidence linking this to a specific person. Nathan pulled out his phone. I have video. Chen's eyebrows rose as he watched the footage. Robert's face was clearly visible, Margaret's voice unmistakable. This is significant, Chen admitted, but you need to understand Judge Harrison. Is Margaret's cousin-in-law. I know. Chen looked uncomfortable. It's more than that. He controls half the county. The sheriff is up for re-election next year. No one's going to want to take this on. Then I'll take it federal, Nathan said. This is part of a larger RICO case. You're federal. National HOA Oversight Division. I investigate corrupt homeowner associations. Chen's expression shifted from skeptical to interested. The HOA corruption unit, I've heard about you guys. You took down that association in Miami that was embezzling millions. That was my case, actually. No shit, Chen caught himself. Sorry, it's fine. Look, Deputy Chen, I know you're in a tough position, but I'm not asking you to arrest anyone yet. Just file the report, document everything. When the federal case breaks, you'll be the local officer who did his job when it mattered. Chen nodded slowly. I'll file the report, but Mr. Hayes, be careful. Margaret Williams has ended careers for less than this. After Chen left, Nathan called Davidson again. They poisoned my grandmother's roses, he said without preamble. You have evidence. Video, audio, soil samples, the whole package. That's destruction of property conspiracy, maybe more. But Nathan, roses. That's not going to bring federal attention. It's not about the roses. It's about the pattern. She's escalating, getting sloppy. She made this personal when she mentioned my father. Davidson was quiet for a moment. You think she had something to do with his death? She all but admitted it. Said heart disease runs in the family, that stress is dangerous for weak hearts. My father died of a heart attack during a county commissioner meeting about development rights. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so now we're not just talking RICO, we're talking potential murder. I'm sending a team, Davidson said, but this is too big for you to handle alone. No, not yet. If feds show up now, she'll lawyer up, destroy evidence. I need her to incriminate herself fully. She's got something planned for the 72-hour deadline. Let her play it out. That's dangerous. That's necessary. Nathan spent the morning making very public phone calls from his porch, letting Margaret's surveillance network report back that he was cracking. He called moving companies for quotes, real estate agents about selling quickly, even a grief counselor about dealing with loss. It was all theater, and Margaret took the bait beautifully. At noon, she arrived with an entourage. 3 golf carts full of HOA board members, all wearing matching polos like some demented country club army. She even had a photographer, ostensibly to document violations, but really to capture what she assumed would be Nathan's defeat. Mr. Hayes? She called out, her voice carrying across the yard. I've brought the architectural committee to assess your violations. I hope you don't mind. Nathan walked out slowly, shoulders slumped in manufactured defeat. It doesn't matter what I mind, does it? Margaret's smile was predatory. Finally understanding your position. Good. That will make this easier. The committee members spread out across his property like locusts, measuring everything, photographing from every angle, making notes on official-looking clipboards. Nathan recognized the intimidation tactic, overwhelming force to break resistance. Dorothy Kim was working in her garden next door, watching the invasion with barely concealed fury. When one of the committee members stepped on her property line, she snapped, Harold Jenkins, you get your foot off my petunias right now or I'll report you for trespassing. Harold. A man who looked like every HOA board member, ever khaki shorts, polo shirt, general air of petty authority, quickly stepped back. Now, Dorothy, Margaret said sweetly, we're all neighbors here. No need for hostility. Neighbors don't destroy each other's gardens in the middle of the night, Dorothy shot back. The committee members exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable, others confused. Apparently not everyone was in on Margaret's nighttime activities. I don't know what you're implying, Margaret said, her voice cooling. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. We all know what you do to people who oppose you. Careful, Dorothy. Slander is a serious accusation. Dorothy laughed. So is poisoning roses that have been here longer than you've been alive. You want to talk about serious accusations? Let's talk about Tom Bradley's dog. Let's talk about the Johnsons' well water. Let's talk about That's enough, Margaret snapped. Committee members, please continue your inspection. But the damage was done. Several committee members were looking at Margaret with new eyes, doubt creeping into their expressions. Nathan filed that away. Not everyone in the HOA was corrupt. Some were just scared or ignorant. The inspection continued for another hour. Nathan endured it all, playing the broken man perfectly. When they finally prepared to leave, Margaret approached him privately. 48 hours, she said quietly. The offer goes down by 10,000 for every hour you delay after that. What if I don't sell? Then things get unpleasant. You think dead roses are bad? Your father thought he was tough too, right up until his heart gave out. But Nathan's phone recording in his pocket captured every word. Are you saying you killed my father? Margaret laughed. I'm saying stress is dangerous for men with weak hearts. All those fights, all those heated arguments at county meetings. The human body can only take so much. Sometimes a little extra pressure is all it takes. A little something in the coffee at the community center. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Of course. She patted his arm condescendingly. You're smarter than your father, Nathan. You'll make the right choice. As the golf cart convoy departed, Nathan saw Robert lingering, pretending to check something on his phone. When Margaret was out of sight, he approached Nathan. She keeps recordings, Robert said quickly, quietly, of everything. Every conversation, every plan, every threat. It's her insurance policy. Where? Home safe. Behind the painting in her office. Combination is her father's death date. Why are you telling me this? Robert looked exhausted. 23 years I've been living with that woman. 23 years of watching her destroy people. I can't do it anymore. Then help me stop her. I can't. She has too much on me. Things I've done for her, but you. He looked at Nathan with desperate hope. You might be able to stop her. Robert, I have to go. He hurried back to his golf cart, but turned back once. Check your mailbox tomorrow morning, before she does. That evening, Nathan had dinner with Dorothy Kim and Linda Thompson. They ate on Dorothy's back porch, away from prying eyes sharing information and stories about Margaret's reign of terror. She started small, Linda explained, just enforcing existing rules strictly. But then she started making new rules, changing them without proper votes. By the time people realized what was happening, she had enough board members in her pocket to control everything. Dorothy nodded. And Judge Harrison made sure any legal challenges failed. Tom Bradley spent $30,000 on lawyers. Harrison threw out his case in 5 minutes. We need more people to come forward, Nathan said. More victims willing to testify. They're scared, Dorothy said. You haven't seen what she does to people who really oppose her. The Johnsons' well was poisoned. They could never prove it, but their water went bad right after they organized a petition against her. Their daughter got sick. They moved within a month. Nathan's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Looking cozy with the troublemakers. Bold choice. Your father was bold too. Notice you haven't visited his grave since you arrived. Don't worry, I put flowers on it yesterday. Foxglove. So appropriate, don't you think? Foxglove. Digitalis. The source of heart medication, and in the wrong doses, a cause of heart attacks. Nathan stood up abruptly. I need to go. What's wrong? Dorothy asked. She just confessed to murdering my father. The women gasped, but Nathan was already moving. He drove to the cemetery, finding his father's grave in the corner where the old families were buried. Fresh foxglove lay across the headstone, purple and mocking. He photographed everything, then called Elena. She confessed. Not directly, but she placed foxglove on his grave and made a comment about it being appropriate. Foxglove contains digitalis. It causes heart attacks. That's not enough for a murder charge. Combined with everything else, the threats, the comments about weak hearts, Robert's testimony, if we can get it. Maybe. But Nathan, we need more. We need physical evidence or a direct confession. Then I'll get it. How? Tomorrow's the deadline. She's planning something big. When she plays her hand, I'll be ready. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He sat in his grandfather's study going through more papers, finding more evidence of the original conspiracy. At 3 a.m., he heard something outside, footsteps, multiple sets. He crept to the window. 3 figures in dark clothing were doing something to his truck. One was underneath it, another at the hood, the third keeping watch. Nathan grabbed his camera using the night vision setting to record everything. He couldn't make out faces, but he could see what they were doing. Sabotage. They were setting up his truck to fail, probably brake lines or steering. He had 2 choices: confront them now or let it play out and use it as evidence. The investigator in him won. He kept recording, documenting every action. When they left, he crept outside and examined the damage. They'd been subtle, loosened lug nuts, just enough to cause a wheel to come off at speed. Potentially fatal, but hard to prove as anything other than poor maintenance. Nathan fixed the sabotage, then installed a hidden camera in his truck's cabin. If they tried again, he'd have them on video. Dawn came with storm clouds appropriate for what Nathan knew was coming. He made coffee, sat on the porch, and waited. At exactly 7 a.m., 72 hours after Margaret's initial threat, the convoy arrived. But this wasn't just golf carts, real police cars, county sheriff vehicles, and a van marked County Health Department. Margaret had brought an army. She emerged from the lead vehicle wearing a business suit instead of her usual HOA uniform. This was her victory outfit, Nathan realized. She'd dressed for what she thought would be his funeral. Mr. Hayes, she called out, her voice carrying official authority. I'm here with Sheriff Thompson, Judge Harrison, and Health Inspector Williams, no relation. We have an emergency condemnation order for this property. Nathan stood slowly. On what grounds? Judge Harrison stepped forward, his black robes making him look like a carry-on bird. We've received reports of illegal chemical dumping on this property. herbicides that threaten the groundwater. The irony was so thick Nathan almost laughed. They'd poisoned his property, then used that poisoning as grounds for condemnation. I have soil samples that prove. Taken by you, an interested party, Harrison interrupted. Inadmissible. Our inspector has his own samples showing dangerous contamination levels. Inspector Williams, who looked deeply uncomfortable, held up a report. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, but the levels are concerning. Nathan bet they were considering Margaret's people had put them there. You have 24 hours to vacate, Harrison continued. After that, the property will be seized for public safety. And let me guess, Nathan said, it'll be sold at auction to one of your development companies. Harrison's face darkened. That's a serious accusation. It's a statement of fact. I have documentation of 23 properties you've acquired this way. Conspiracy theories from a desperate man, Margaret said dismissively. Sheriff, please serve the condemnation notice. Sheriff Thompson, a thick man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, stepped forward with the papers. Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry, but… Sheriff Thompson, Nathan interrupted. Are you aware that serving fraudulent legal documents is a felony? Thompson paused. These came from Judge Harrison. Who is Margaret Williams' cousin-in-law and business partner in a development scheme? Did you verify the health department's findings independently? That's not my job. Actually, it is. You swore an oath to uphold the law, not to be Harrison's delivery boy. Thompson's face reddened. Now listen here. No, you listen. Nathan pulled out his phone. I'm about to play a recording that's going to change everything. He hit play. Margaret's voice filled the air, talking about poisoning his father, about the systematic destruction of families, about Harrison's involvement. The recording was crystal clear. The assembled group stood frozen. Several deputies exchanged glances. Inspector Williams stepped back from Margaret like she was radioactive. Margaret's face had gone white. That's fake. He's using AI or something. I have video too, Nathan continued. Your husband poisoning my roses on your orders. You specifying which shoes he should wear to hide evidence. Everything. He turned to Sheriff Thompson. Sheriff, you have two choices. Arrest these people now for conspiracy, fraud, and murder, or be named as a co-conspirator when the FBI arrives tomorrow. The FBI? Thompson's voice cracked. I'm the executive director of the National HOA Oversight Division. This is a federal investigation into racketeering, and you're about to be on the wrong side of it. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then Deputy Chen stepped forward from the group of officers. Sheriff, I've been documenting irregularities in HOA-related property seizures for months. Mr. Hayes is right. This is criminal conspiracy. Other deputies nodded, apparently emboldened by Chen's stand. Harrison tried to maintain control. This is ridiculous. I'm a sitting judge. Not for long, Nathan said. He pulled out a folder he'd been holding. This is a federal warrant for your arrest signed by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals this morning. Turns out the FBI has been watching you for a while. I just gave them the final evidence they needed. That was a bluff. The warrant wouldn't come through until tomorrow, but Harrison didn't know that. His face crumbled as he realized his empire was collapsing. Margaret made one last desperate play. You can't prove anything about your father. It's all speculation. Actually, Robert Williams stepped out from behind one of the vehicles. I can prove it. Everyone turned to stare at Margaret's husband. I have recordings. Robert continued, his voice stronger than Nathan had ever heard it. 20 years of recordings, including one where she describes exactly how she poisoned William Hayes. Digitalis in his coffee, small doses over months. She called it her special recipe. Margaret's face contorted with rage. You pathetic worm, after everything I've done for you. Everything you've done? Robert laughed bitterly. You mean destroying my soul piece by piece, making me an accomplice to murder? I'm done, Margaret. I'd rather go to prison than spend another day as your puppet. He pulled out a flash drive and handed it to Deputy Chen. Everything's on there. Every crime, every confession, every victim. Margaret lunged at Robert, but the deputies restrained her. Sheriff Thompson, seeing which way the wind was blowing, finally acted. Margaret Williams, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and suspicion of murder. Judge Harrison, you're under arrest for judicial corruption and racketeering. As they were led away in handcuffs, Margaret turned to Nathan one last time. This isn't over. I have friends. Powerful friends. So do I, Nathan replied. 300 HOA presidents in federal prison, all put there by me. The convoy dispersed quickly after that, deputies eager to distance themselves from the corruption. Only Deputy Chen remained. That was impressive, Chen said, but she's right about having friends. This is going to get messy. I'm counting on it, Nathan said. The messier it gets, the more attention it draws. The more attention, the harder it is to bury. That afternoon, the news broke across Texas. Corrupt HOA president arrested for murder made every local station. By evening, it was national news. Nathan's phone rang constantly, reporters, investigators, and surprisingly dozens of HOA victims from across the country sharing their own stories of abuse and corruption. Elena arrived that evening with a team of federal prosecutors. You did it, she said. This is going to be the biggest HOA corruption case in history. It's not done yet, Nathan said. This was just one association in one small town. There are thousands more like it across the country. Then we'd better get to work. As the sun set over his grandfather's ranch, now safe from Margaret's grasp, Nathan felt his father's presence strongly. Justice had been a long time coming, but it had finally arrived. Dorothy Kim brought over a casserole, Linda Thompson brought wine, and soon the house was full of neighbors celebrating their freedom from Margaret's tyranny. What happens now? Dorothy asked. Now we rebuild, Nathan said. We create a real community association, one that actually serves the residents instead of terrorizing them. And Margaret? She's looking at life in prison. Harrison, too. The FBI found evidence linking them to similar schemes in 3 other states. Robert Williams arrived as the evening wore on, looking uncertain. The neighbors gave him a wide berth until Nathan waved him over. That was brave what you did, Nathan said. It was necessary, Robert replied. I should have done it years ago. What matters is you did it now. Robert pulled out an envelope. I found this in Margaret's safe, thought you should have it. Inside was a letter from Nathan's father to Margaret dated a week before his death. Margaret, I know what you're doing, the digitalis in the coffee, the systematic poisoning. I've documented everything and sent copies to federal authorities. Your reign of terror ends now. William Hayes, Jr. Nathan's hands shook. His father had known. He'd tried to stop her. There's more, Robert said quietly. She intercepted the package to the FBI. She has a contact at the post office. Your father's evidence never made it out. Where is it now? In the safe. I grabbed everything. He handed Nathan another flash drive. Your father was thorough. He documented everything, dates, times, symptoms. He knew he was dying and used himself as evidence. Nathan had to sit down. His father had sacrificed himself to gather evidence, knowing that someday someone would find it and finish what he started. The federal courthouse in Austin buzzed with the kind of energy that only comes from a high-profile case. Nathan adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror, noting the dark circles under his eyes. 3 weeks of nonstop investigation, depositions, and evidence gathering had taken their toll. Elena Martinez entered, her heels clicking on the marble floor. They're ready for you. Margaret's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. No deals, Nathan said flatly. She murdered my father. I know, but the prosecutor wants you to hear the offer. The conference room was packed. Federal prosecutors, FBI agents, local law enforcement, and in the corner, shackled and diminished Margaret Williams. Her orange jumpsuit hung loose on her frame. 3 weeks in federal custody had stripped away her carefully maintained appearance. Her lawyer, a shark named Brennan from Dallas, stood as Nathan entered. Mr. Hayes, my client is prepared to provide information about a larger network of HOA corruption in exchange for reduced charges. She can provide that information from death row, Nathan replied. Margaret's composure cracked. You sanctimonious bastard! You think you've won. You have no idea how deep this goes. Then tell us, FBI Special Agent Rivera said. Full cooperation might keep you from a lethal injection. Margaret laughed bitterly. You want names? Fine. Start with Patricia Chen in Colorado Springs, David Morrison in Phoenix, Jennifer Walters in Miami. They all learned from me, my methods, my strategies. Nathan pulled out his phone recording. Keep going. There's a whole network. We share tactics, legal strategies, corrupt judges. Your precious father stumbled onto it accidentally. He thought it was just about Willowbrook Ranch. She leaned forward. There are over 200 associations across 15 states running the same scam. The room went silent. Even Brennan looked shocked. You're saying this is organized crime on a national level? Agent Rivera asked. I'm saying we turned the American dream into a revenue stream. Every HOA in the network kicks up 10% to a central fund. That fund buys judges, prosecutors, state legislators. We've influenced housing legislation in 12 states. Nathan felt sick. This was bigger than even he'd imagined. Who runs the central fund? Elena asked. Margaret smiled coldly. You really want to know Senator Michael Harrison, Judge Harrison's brother. The revelation landed like a bomb. A sitting U.S. senator involved in nationwide HOA corruption. Prove it, Rivera demanded. Check Harrison's campaign finances. Every major donor is a developer who's benefited from our foreclosures. Cross-reference that with property transfers in HOA territories. The pattern is obvious if you know where to look. Nathan's phone rang. Davidson calling from Washington. Nathan, we've got a problem. Someone leaked the investigation to the press. They're spinning it as government overreach attacking private property rights. Senator Harrison is calling for congressional hearings into your department. He's trying to get ahead of the story, Nathan said. He knows we're coming for him. It gets worse. He's filed an ethics complaint against you claiming you used government resources for a personal vendetta. Nathan looked at Margaret, who was smirking despite her shackles. This was your plan all along. If you go down, you're taking everyone with you. Mutually assured destruction, she agreed. Either we all walk or we all burn. But Nathan had spent 15 years fighting corruption. He knew how to play this game. Agent Rivera, I need you to freeze all assets associated with the Central Fund immediately. Elena file RICO charges against every HOA president Margaret named, and someone get me a direct line to the Attorney General. You can't fight a senator, Margaret's lawyer said. He has too much power. Watch me, Nathan replied. The next 48 hours were a blur of legal maneuvers and media warfare. Senator Harrison went on every news show that would have him painting Nathan as a rogue bureaucrat drunk on power. But Nathan had something Harrison didn't expect: an army of victims ready to speak out. Dorothy Kim appeared on national television, tiny but fierce, describing years of HOA terrorism. Tom Bradley, in a wheelchair but unbroken, testified about losing his home over a bird feeder. The Johnsons showed medical records of their daughter's illness from poisoned well water. The public tide turned quickly. HOA corruption started trending. Stories poured in from across the country. Families destroyed life-saving, stolen dreams, crushed by petty tyrants with measuring tapes and fine books. Nathan coordinated everything from a war room in the federal building, surrounded by whiteboards covered in connections, timelines, and evidence chains. The network Margaret had described was real, and it was vast. We've identified 87 associations definitely involved, Agent Rivera reported. Another 100 possibles. The money trail leads to offshore accounts in the Caymans. How much total? Conservative estimate $400 million over 10 years. Nathan whistled low. This wasn't just corruption, it was one of the largest property fraud schemes in American history. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, but he recognized the area code, Colorado Springs. Mr. Hayes. This is Patricia Chen. Margaret Williams was my mentor. Nathan put her on speaker. Miss Chen, you should know you're being recorded, and anything you say, I want to make a deal. Full immunity in exchange for everything. Documents, recordings, the whole network's playbook. Why now? Because Margaret was right about one thing: it's all going to burn. I'd rather be a witness than a defendant. Within hours, Patricia Chen was on a plane to Austin with 12 boxes of documents and a laptop full of recordings. The dominoes were starting to fall. But Senator Harrison wasn't going down without a fight. He called an emergency Senate hearing on government overreach in private community governance. Nathan was subpoenaed to testify. The Senate hearing room was packed. C-SPAN cameras rolled as Senator Harrison, silver-haired and distinguished, gavelled the session to order. Mr. Hayes, Harrison began, his voice dripping with false concern. You've accused dozens of community associations of corruption based on the word of a convicted criminal. How do you justify this witch hunt? Nathan leaned into the microphone. Senator, I have documentary evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. Would you like me to present it now? This is not a criminal trial. No, but it could be. Particularly the documents showing your campaign received $3 million from developers who benefited from illegal HOA foreclosures. The gallery erupted. Harrison pounded his gavel frantically. Those are baseless accusations. Actually, Nathan pulled out a folder. These are copies of bank transfers from the Cayman accounts to your campaign's PAC. The FBI served warrants this morning. Harrison's face went from red to white. This hearing is adjourned. But it was too late. FBI agents were already entering the chamber. Senator Michael Harrison, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, and corruption. As they led Harrison away, Nathan felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. The network was unraveling, but at what cost? His father was still dead. The family's destroyed couldn't be made whole. Back in Texas, he stood in his grandmother's garden where new roses were beginning to bloom alongside the survivors. Dorothy Kim worked beside him, carefully tending the young plants. Your father would be proud, she said softly. He'd be alive if I'd come home sooner. You can't think like that. He made his choice to fight, just like you made yours. Robert Williams approached hesitantly. He'd been staying in a small apartment in town, cooperating with authorities, trying to rebuild a life separate from Margaret's shadow. Nathan, there's something else you should know, something I didn't tell the FBI. Nathan tensed. What? Margaret has a daughter, from before we met. She gave her up for adoption, but they stayed in contact. The daughter is a judge in California. Margaret was grooming her to expand the network to the West Coast. What's her name? Rebecca Morrison. She goes by a different last name now, Fitzgerald. She's on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Nathan's blood ran cold. A federal appeals court judge involved in the conspiracy. He called Rivera immediately. We have a problem. The corruption goes into the federal judiciary. How high? Ninth Circuit. Maybe higher. Rivera cursed. This is going to trigger a constitutional crisis. If federal judges are compromised, then every case they've touched is suspect. I know. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He sat in his grandfather's study, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy that seemed to grow larger every day. His phone rang, blocked number. Mr. Hayes. The voice was cultured, feminine, cold. I'm Judge Rebecca Fitzgerald. I believe you've been speaking to my mother. Judge Fitzgerald, you should know this call is being recorded. I assumed as much. I'm calling to propose a solution to our mutual problem. We don't have a mutual problem. You have a corruption problem. She laughed softly. Mr. Hayes, I've reviewed your father's medical records, the ones that weren't destroyed. Did you know he had a pre-existing heart condition documented years before he met my mother? Nathan's grip tightened on the phone. He was poisoned. Prove it. Without a body to examine with his medical history, no prosecutor would touch a murder charge. My mother will plead to fraud, do 5 years minimum security, and this all goes away. Like hell. The alternative is that we expose every decision your department has made as potentially corrupt. Every HOA you've investigated, every president you've prosecuted, all of it becomes suspect if the head of the department is proven to be conducting a personal vendetta. You're threatening the entire system. I'm offering you a way out. Take it or watch everything you've built crumble. Nathan hung up and immediately called Elena. We need to exhume my father's body. Nathan. She practically admitted they can't let us examine him. That means there's evidence. Digitalis stays in hair and bone tissue. We can prove murder. You need family permission. I'm his only family. I give permission. The exhumation happened at dawn 3 days later. Nathan stood in the cemetery rain watching them raise his father's coffin. It felt like sacrilege, but justice demanded it. The forensic pathologist worked quickly taking samples. We'll have preliminary results in 72 hours. Those 3 days were the longest of Nathan's life. The investigation continued, more arrests, more revelations, more corruption exposed, but everything hinged on those test results. When the call finally came, Nathan was in court watching Margaret's bail hearing. "Nathan," the pathologist said, "your father had toxic levels of digitalis in his system, consistent with chronic poisoning over several months. This was murder." Nathan stood up in the courtroom. "Your Honor, I've just received the forensic results. William Hayes Jr. was murdered. I request that Margaret Williams be charged with capital murder." Margaret's lawyer objected frantically, but the judge, a federal judge from outside Texas brought in specifically to avoid conflicts, nodded grimly. "Based on this new evidence, bail is revoked. Mrs. Williams will be held pending additional charges." As they led Margaret away, she turned to Nathan one last time. "You think you've won, but you've only scratched the surface. Every HOA in America is corrupt to some degree. You can't fight them all." "I can try," Nathan replied. 6 weeks later, the trial began. The prosecution's case was devastating. Robert's recordings, Patricia Chen's testimony, financial documents, and finally the forensic evidence of murder. Nathan took the stand on day 3. "Mr. Hayes," the prosecutor began, "tell us about your father." "He was a good man who stood up to corruption. It cost him his life, but he never stopped fighting. He knew he was being poisoned and used his own death to gather evidence." "How does that make you feel?" Nathan looked directly at Margaret. "Proud. He sacrificed everything for justice. The least I can do is finish what he started." The defense tried to paint Nathan as biased, vengeful, unreliable, but the evidence was overwhelming. Margaret took the stand in her own defense, a desperate last move. "Everything I did was for the community," she claimed. "These people didn't maintain their properties. They brought down values by having bird feeders," the prosecutor interrupted, "by growing roses, by existing while you wanted their land." Margaret's composure finally shattered completely. "They were in the way. My father had vision, and these backward rural idiots destroyed him. They all deserved what they got." The confession echoed in the silent courtroom. Even her lawyer looked defeated. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentence came a week later. Life without parole for murder plus 300 years for the other charges. As they led her away for the last time, Margaret said nothing. The queen of the HOA was finally dethroned, but the work wasn't done. Senator Harrison's trial was coming. Judge Fitzgerald had been arrested. The network of corrupt HOAs was being dismantled state by state. Nathan stood in his grandmother's garden, now fully restored. New roses bloomed alongside the old survivors, a metaphor he didn't need explained. Elena joined him. "The Attorney General wants to expand your department. Quadruple the budget, hire 50 new investigators. You'll oversee the entire national cleanup. From here, you can work remotely. Willowbrook Ranch can be your base of operations." Nathan smiled. Grandpa would like that. Taking down corruption from the ranch they tried to steal. Dorothy Kim appeared with her usual impeccable timing, carrying a tray of iced tea. "So you're staying?" "I'm staying. Someone needs to keep an eye on the new HOA board." "About that," Linda Thompson said, joining them, "we voted last night, unanimously. We want you to be president." Nathan nearly choked on his tea. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "You know more about HOAs than anyone." "That's exactly why. I've seen what power does to people." "Then you'll know to avoid it," Dorothy said simply. "Besides, it's a 1-year term, and we're implementing term limits. No one can serve more than 2 years total." Nathan considered it. Leading an HOA the right way, showing it could be done with transparency and fairness, it would be a fitting tribute to his father. "All right, but we do this right. Open meetings, published minutes, every financial transaction public. We're going to be the model for HOA reform." That evening, they held the first truly open HOA meeting in Willowbrook Ranch history. Every resident attended, even some who hadn't been seen in years. Nathan stood at the podium where Margaret had once ruled through fear. "I want to start by saying what Margaret Williams never did. I work for you. This association exists to serve the community, not control it. Every rule will be voted on. Every fine will require proof and due process, and anyone who wants to see the books can do so anytime. The applause was genuine warm healing. Old Tom Bradley raised his hand. What about bird feeders? Nathan grinned. I motioned to specifically protect the right to bird feeders. All in favor. The unanimous aye was deafening. As the meeting continued discussing real issues, road maintenance, community events, helping elderly neighbors, Nathan felt his father's presence. This was what community was supposed to be. His phone buzzed. A message from Davidson in Washington. Fitzgerald flipped. She's giving us everything. The network goes deeper than we thought. Congressmen, state governors, even some federal prosecutors. You opened Pandora's box. Nathan typed back, good, let it all come out. He looked around the room at his neighbors, his community, his home. They'd survived Margaret Williams. They'd survived corruption that went to the highest levels of government. They'd survived, and now they were thriving. The call came at 3 a.m., 6 months after Margaret's conviction. Nathan had grown accustomed to middle-of-the-night emergencies since taking over the expanded National HOA Oversight Division, but this one was different. Nathan, it's Rivera. We have a situation. Margaret Williams is dead. Nathan sat up instantly awake. What happened? Official cause is suicide, hanging in her cell. But Nathan, she left a video confession. It's explosive. Send it to me. The video arrived encrypted, heavily secured. Nathan watched it in his study, the room where he'd first discovered the depth of Margaret's corruption. Margaret looked gaunt, defeated, but her eyes still held that calculating gleam. If you're watching this, I'm dead. Probably by my own hand, though. In this place, you never know. She laughed bitterly. Nathan Hayes, you think you destroyed me, but I was just a small player. You want the truth, here it is. She leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. The HOA network isn't just about property theft. It's about control. Every major city in America has HOAs we've compromised. We decide who lives where, who builds what, who stays, and who goes. We've been engaged in systematic demographic engineering for 20 years. Nathan paused the video, his mind racing. Demographic engineering through HOAs, it was brilliant and terrifying. Margaret continued. Check Phoenix 2015. We drove out 3,000 Hispanic families through targeted enforcement. Cleveland. 2018, 2000. Black families forced out to make way for gentrification. It's not just about money. It's about reshaping America one neighborhood at a time. Senator Harrison wasn't the top. He reported to someone called the architect. I never met them, only heard the voice on encrypted calls. They have a vision for America where every neighborhood is controlled, monitored, regulated, where undesirables can be removed through legal means that can't be challenged. The video continued for another hour, Margaret laying out names, dates, operations. It was a deathbed confession that implicated hundreds of officials across the country. One more thing, Nathan, Margaret said as the video neared its end. Your mother didn't die in a car accident. Check the brake line reports from 1995. The architect doesn't like loose ends. The screen went black. Nathan's hands trembled as he reached for his phone. His mother had died when he was 12, a single-car accident on a clear day. He'd never questioned it. He called Rivera. We need to reopen my mother's case. Nathan. And we need to find this architect. Margaret gave us the roadmap. The next morning, Nathan convened an emergency meeting of his expanded team. 50 investigators, prosecutors, and analysts gathered in the war room they'd established in an Austin federal building. Margaret Williams' final confession changes everything, Nathan began. This isn't just corruption. It's social engineering on a massive scale. He pulled up maps on the screen showing HOA foreclosure patterns across major cities. When overlaid with demographic data, the pattern was undeniable. They're redlining through HOAs. Agent Sarah Chen, Patricia Chen's daughter, who'd joined the investigation to atone for her mother's crimes, observed, using violations and fines to force out specific populations. It's genius in its evil, Elena added, completely legal on the surface. No civil rights violations they can be charged with, just enforcing community standards. Nathan nodded grimly. We need to identify every compromised HOA and figure out who this architect is. The investigation exploded in scope. What had started as one corrupt HOA in Texas now encompassed thousands of associations across all 50 states. The patterns were clear once you knew where to look. Meanwhile, in Willowbrook Ranch, life had settled into something approaching normal. Nathan split his time between running the investigation and serving as HOA president, determined to show that these organizations could function ethically. It was during a routine board meeting that the next break came. Dorothy Kim raised her hand during public comment. Nathan, there's something you should know. A man came by asking questions about you yesterday. Said he was a journalist, but something felt off. What did he look like? Tall gray hair, expensive suit. Had an accent, maybe European. He was particularly interested in your family history. Nathan's instincts prickled. He increased security at the ranch and had Rivera run facial recognition on the ranch's security footage. The match came back within hours. Victor Kruger, former East German intelligence, now a security consultant for multinational corporations. What was a former Stasi operative doing in rural Texas asking about Nathan Hayes? We need to bring him in, Rivera said. No, let him make his move, but watch him. 3 days later, Kruger made his move, but not how Nathan expected. He walked into the federal building in Austin and asked to speak with Nathan directly. They met in an interrogation room, though Kruger wasn't under arrest yet. Mr. Hayes, Kruger said in accented English, I represent certain interests who are concerned about your investigation. The architect Kruger smiled slightly. That's one name. My employer prefers to remain anonymous, but they wanted me to deliver a message. I'm listening. Stop digging into the network and you'll be made very wealthy. Continue and everyone you care about will suffer. Your neighbors in Willowbrook Ranch, for instance. Accidents happen in rural Texas. Gas leaks, electrical fires, contaminated water supplies. Nathan leaned back. You're threatening an entire community. I'm explaining reality. The network you're fighting has resources beyond your imagination. Judges, senators, governors, that's just the beginning. We have people in intelligence agencies, the military, federal law enforcement. You cannot win. We'll see about that. Kruger stood to leave, then paused. Your mother was brave too. It didn't help her. Nathan's control snapped. He slammed his hand on the table. You just confessed to murder. I confessed to nothing. I simply observed that brave people often have accidents, like your father, like your mother. Don't join them, Mr. Hayes. After Kruger left, Nathan gathered his team. He just declared war on the entire community of Willowbrook Ranch. We need to protect those people. How? Elena asked. We can't provide security for an entire town. We don't have to. We just need to make it too costly for them to act. Nathan's plan was audacious. He called a town meeting in Willowbrook Ranch that night. Folks, I need to be honest with you. My investigation has uncovered something massive, and the people involved are threatening our community. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Tom Bradley stood up. We faced down Margaret Williams. We can handle whatever comes next. This is bigger than Margaret. These people have resources connections. They're threatening accidents, fires, gas leaks, contamination. So what do we do? Dorothy asked. Nathan smiled grimly. We make ourselves too visible to touch. I want every house equipped with cameras all feeding to a public stream. I want daily community meetings, all live streamed. I want national media here every week. We're going to turn Willowbrook Ranch into the most watched community in America. Linda Thompson raised her hand. How do we pay for all this? I've been in contact with a tech billionaire who's had his own HOA problems. He's willing to fund everything, cameras, internet infrastructure, even a documentary crew to follow our story. Within a week, Willowbrook Ranch was transformed. Every street had cameras. Every house had panic buttons connected directly to federal marshals. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all had stringers stationed in town. The message was clear. Touch this community, and the whole world will be watching. Kruger and his employers got the message. The threats stopped, but Nathan knew it was only temporary. They were regrouping, planning something bigger. The break came from an unexpected source, Judge Rebecca Fitzgerald, Margaret's daughter. I want to make a deal, she said during a deposition. Full immunity witness protection in exchange for the architect's identity. You know who it is. I've known for years. My mother thought she was protecting me by keeping me at arm's length, but I figured it out. Then tell us. Rebecca looked directly at Nathan. You're not going to believe this. The architect is Charles Morrison, CEO of Morrison Property Management, the largest HOA management company in America. Nathan's blood ran cold. Morrison Property Management ran 30,000 HOAs across the country, controlling communities with 50 million residents. He's been using his company to build a shadow government, Rebecca continued. Every HOA is a little fiefdom where constitutional rights don't fully apply. He controls where people live, how they live, what they can do with their property. He's created a parallel legal system that supersedes local government. Why? Power, control. He believes democracy has failed, that America needs to be run like a corporation with HOAs as the board of directors for every community. He calls it democratic corporatism. The scope of it was staggering. Morrison hadn't just corrupted the system, he'd built an entirely new one. We need to take him down, Elena said. How? Nathan asked. He's not just some corrupt businessman. He's got a private army of lawyers, probably private security, and enough money to buy judges wholesale. Then we don't fight him in court, Rivera suggested. We expose him publicly, make his vision so toxic that no one will support it. Nathan's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Hayes. This is Charles Morrison. I understand you've been looking for me. Nathan put him on speaker. Iko Ditcham, Mr. Morrison. Or should I call you the architect? Morrison laughed a warm, grandfatherly sound that was somehow more chilling than any threat. I prefer Charles. The architect was Margaret's dramatic flair. Poor woman always did love her theater. You had her killed. She killed herself. I simply provided the motivation. She was going to expose things prematurely before the vision was complete. Your vision of an America run by HOAs. My vision of an America run efficiently. Democracy is messy and efficient, but HOAs. They're nimble, responsive, unencumbered by constitutional limitations. They're the future. They're totalitarian. They're voluntary. Every person who buys into an HOA community chooses to live under its rules. We're just making those rules more comprehensive and forcing out anyone who doesn't comply. Market forces, Mr. Hayes. Nothing illegal about it. Nathan knew he was being recorded, knew Morrison was too smart to explicitly confess to crimes. But hubris was a powerful drug. What about my parents? Were they market forces too? Morrison was quiet for a moment. Your parents were obstacles. Your mother was investigating financial irregularities in HOAs back in the 90s. Your father picked up where she left off. Both were removed from the equation. You're confessing to murder. I'm confessing to nothing. I'm simply observing that obstacles to progress tend to resolve themselves. You could resolve yourself too, Mr. Hayes. I could make you incredibly wealthy. Your own state to run as you see fit. Not interested. Then you'll be resolved like your parents. The difference is this time we'll take your entire community with you. Willowbrook Ranch will be a cautionary tale about what happens to those who resist progress. The line went dead. Nathan looked at his team. We have him on tape discussing my parents' murders. It's not enough for court, Elena said. Too ambiguous. Then we need more, and I know how to get it. Nathan's plan was dangerous, possibly suicidal. He would go undercover, pretend to be corrupted, get close to Morrison, and document everything. Absolutely not, Rivera said. It's too dangerous. It's the only way. Morrison's ego is his weakness. He wants to convert me to prove his vision is superior. I'll let him think he's winning. It took a week to set up. Nathan publicly announced he was taking a leave of absence from the investigation, citing exhaustion and mental health concerns. He let slip to known informants that he was reconsidering Morrison's offer. Morrison took the bait. The invitation came within days, a private meeting at Morrison's estate in Virginia. Nathan wore a wire, had GPS trackers hidden throughout his clothes and belongings, and a team of FBI agents stationed just outside the property line. Morrison's estate was a monument to controlled perfection. Every hedge precisely trimmed, every stone pathway exactly aligned. It was like an HOA community taken to its logical extreme. Morrison himself was 73, silver-haired, immaculately dressed. He looked like everyone's favorite grandfather, which made him even more terrifying. "Nathan," he greeted warmly, "I'm so glad you reconsidered." They walked through gardens that were beautiful but sterile, lacking any wildness or natural charm. "This is what America could be," Morrison said, gesturing at the controlled perfection. "Ordered, efficient, beautiful." "Lifeless," Nathan countered. Morrison smiled. "Life is chaos. We impose order on chaos. That's what separates us from animals." "Is that why you killed my parents?" "They were too chaotic." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Your parents were idealists. They believed in democracy and the messiness of freedom. Such naive concepts." "So you had them murdered." "I had them removed. Your mother's brake lines, your father's digitalis, clean, efficient solutions to problems." Nathan's wire was recording everything. This was the confession they needed. How many others? Hundreds over the years. Anyone who threatened the vision. Journalists, investigators, politicians who wouldn't be bought. All removed efficiently through our network. Through HOAs. HOAs are just the beginning. Once we control every community, we control the country. Elections become meaningless when we decide who can afford to live where, who can build what, whose property values rise or fall. Nathan felt sick but kept pushing. "And if I join you, you'd run the Southwest region, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, 20 million people under your jurisdiction, under HOA control, under efficient management. Democracy has failed, Nathan. Look at the chaos, the inefficiency, the waste. We offer something better: corporate efficiency with community aesthetics." Morrison led him to a study where walls were covered with maps, each showing HOA territories across America. Red pins marked compromised associations. Blue pins marked targets. There were thousands of each. "By 2030, 90% of Americans will live in HOA communities," Morrison explained. "By 2035, we'll have enough control to call a constitutional convention, reshape the country's founding documents. Replace democracy with corporatocracy. Replace chaos with order." Nathan memorized everything: the maps, the documents visible on Morrison's desk, the names on the computer screen Morrison carelessly left visible. "I need time to think," Nathan said finally. "Of course, but Nathan, this offer won't remain open indefinitely. Either you're with us or you're an obstacle, and you know what happens to obstacles." As Nathan left, he noticed security cameras everywhere, guards at every checkpoint. Morrison's estate was a fortress, but fortresses built on arrogance always had weaknesses. Back in the FBI surveillance van, Nathan removed the wire with shaking hands. "We got it all," Rivera said. "Multiple confessions to murder, conspiracy, racketeering. This is enough to bury him. It's enough to arrest him, but his network will survive. We need to destroy the whole system." The arrest of Charles Morrison should have been the climax of the story, but Nathan knew better. Hydras didn't die when you cut off the head, they grew new ones. Morrison's arrest happened at dawn, coordinated across 12 states simultaneously. FBI agents raided his Virginia estate, his corporate headquarters in Delaware, and dozens of HOA management offices nationwide. Nathan watched from the FBI command center as Morrison was led away in handcuffs, still wearing his silk pajamas, still maintaining that patrician dignity even in defeat. "No statement," Morrison told the cameras. "My attorneys will handle everything." Within hours, those attorneys, a team of 30 from the nation's top firms, had filed motions to dismiss claims of entrapment and accusations of government overreach. Morrison's propaganda machine kicked into high gear, painting him as a successful businessman targeted by a vindictive government employee with a personal grudge. But Nathan had anticipated this. While Morrison's lawyers fought the criminal charges, Nathan unleashed something far more devastating: the complete database of compromised HOAs released simultaneously to every major news outlet in America. The leak was strategic, carefully timed. Every document was authenticated, every connection verified. 50 million Americans woke up to discover their HOA was part of a criminal conspiracy. The reaction was volcanic. In Phoenix, residents stormed an HOA board meeting demanding resignations. In Atlanta, homeowners filed a class action lawsuit that would eventually reach the Supreme Court. In Seattle, an entire HOA board fled the state rather than face their angry constituents. Nathan stood in his grandfather's garden, watching the news coverage on his phone. Each story was another brick in Morrison's wall crumbling. Elena called. Morrison's lawyers want to deal, full cooperation in exchange for minimum security protective custody. No deals. Nathan, he has information about foreign involvement. The Chinese, the Russians, apparently, they were funding parts of the network using HOAs to influence American communities. Nathan felt his blood chill. This was even bigger than he'd imagined. Set up the meeting. The federal courthouse in D.C. had been transformed into a fortress. Metal detectors at every entrance, snipers on the roof, a no-fly zone overhead. Morrison had made too many enemies for the government to take chances with his safety. Nathan entered through a secure entrance, passing through multiple checkpoints before reaching the conference room where Morrison waited, flanked by his attorneys. Morrison looked older, grayer, but his eyes still held that unsettling confidence. "Nathan," he greeted, "I underestimated you. You killed my parents, and you destroyed my life's work. I suppose we're even." Nathan's hands clenched into fists under the table. "We'll never be even." Morrison leaned forward. "You want information about the foreign connections? I'll give you everything: names, bank accounts, meeting recordings. But I want something in return. You're in no position to negotiate. I'm in the perfect position. Without me, you'll never uncover the full network. There are sleeper cells in HOAs across the country waiting for activation. Foreign agents embedded as board members, property managers, landscaping company owners. They're invisible until they move." "Why should I believe you?" Morrison smiled. "Check the Willowbrook Ranch HOA board. Your own board, Nathan. I guarantee you have at least one foreign asset among your neighbors." The suggestion was absurd, but Nathan couldn't dismiss it entirely. He'd learned that Morrison's reach exceeded imagination. Back in Willowbrook Ranch, Nathan convened an emergency board meeting. The 5 members, Dorothy Kim, Linda Thompson, Tom Bradley Newcomer, James Patterson, and himself, gathered in the community center. "I need to tell you all something difficult," Nathan began. "Morrison claims there's a foreign agent on this board." The room erupted in disbelief and anger. "That's ridiculous," Linda said. "We've all known each other for years." "Except for James," Tom pointed out. James Patterson had moved to Willowbrook Ranch 8 months ago, just before Margaret's downfall. He was quiet, helpful, had volunteered for the board when they needed members. Nothing about him seemed suspicious, which itself was suspicious in Nathan's experience. "I'm happy to submit to any investigation," James said calmly. Too calmly. Nathan studied him. "Where did you work before moving here?" "Software development in Austin." "Which company?" "A startup. It folded, which is why I took early retirement." Nathan made a note to have Rivera investigate. But it was Dorothy who provided the breakthrough. "James," she said slowly, "you told me you learned gardening from your grandmother in Minnesota, but last week you mentioned your grandmother's rose garden in Vladivostok." The room went silent. James's expression didn't change, but Nathan saw his hand move slightly toward his pocket. "Don't," Nathan said quietly. "The FBI has snipers on every building around this community center." James, or whatever his real name was, relaxed his hand. When he spoke, his Midwestern accent was gone, replaced by something Eastern European. "You Americans are so trusting," he said. "I've been reporting on your community for 8 months, every meeting, every decision, every vulnerability." "To whom?" Nathan demanded. "Does it matter? China, Russia, Saudi Arabia? Everyone wants influence in American communities. HOAs are perfect entry points. No security clearances required, no background checks, just a willingness to volunteer for thankless work." The FBI arrested James within minutes. His real name was Dmitry Volkov, an SVR operative who'd been in America for 3 years under deep cover. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. If foreign agents had penetrated HOAs, then Morrison's network wasn't just criminal, it was a national security threat. President Harrison, no relation to Judge Harrison, addressed the nation that evening. "My fellow Americans, we've uncovered a conspiracy that threatens the very fabric of our communities. Homeowner associations designed to maintain property values and community standards have been corrupted into tools of control, discrimination, and foreign influence. Effective immediately, I'm signing an executive order placing all HOA operations under federal oversight until we can ensure they're free from corruption. The backlash was immediate. HOA advocates screamed about government overreach, property rights groups filed lawsuits, cable news exploded with debates about freedom versus security. But in Willowbrook Ranch, something beautiful was happening. The community came together like never before. Without an HOA temporarily, neighbors simply helped each other. Dorothy organized garden sharing. Tom started a tool library. Linda coordinated meal trains for elderly residents. "We don't need rules to be good neighbors," Dorothy said at a community gathering. "We just need to care about each other." Nathan watched from his porch, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years, hope. But Morrison wasn't done. From his federal holding cell, he orchestrated one final gambit. Nathan's phone rang at midnight. Rivera's voice was panicked. Morrison's dead, poisoned, digitalis in his food. The irony was too perfect, too pointed. Someone had killed Morrison the same way Margaret had killed Nathan's father. Who had access? That's the thing, nobody. The food was prepared in a secure kitchen delivered by federal marshals. This had to be an inside job. Nathan knew immediately what had happened. Morrison had engineered his own death, one final manipulation to avoid justice and create a martyr for his movement. The video surfaced within hours. Morrison recorded days before his death, claiming he was being silenced for exposing government corruption. "They'll kill me rather than let the truth come out," Morrison said to the camera. "But my death will spark a revolution. Every HOA in America will rise up against federal tyranny." It was masterful propaganda, and it worked. HOA boards across the country. The non-corrupt ones began resisting federal oversight. Some communities declared themselves autonomous zones, refusing to recognize government authority. Nathan realized they were on the brink of something unprecedented, a civil conflict fought not with armies but with property liens and violation notices. He convened his team one final time. "We need to end this before it spirals completely out of control," he said. "Morrison's dead, but his vision is very much alive." "How do we fight an idea?" Elena asked. "With a better idea," Nathan replied. "We show them what HOAs could be, community organizations that actually serve their communities." The solution came from an unexpected source, Robert Williams, Margaret's husband, who'd been living quietly in Willowbrook Ranch, working to atone for his complicity. "I have something," he told Nathan. Margaret kept records of every legitimate HOA in the country, the ones that actually worked, that served their communities without corruption. There are thousands of them. Nathan saw the opportunity immediately. Instead of tarring all HOAs with the same brush they could highlight, the good ones create a model for reform rather than revolution. The campaign was called Communities First. Nathan traveled the country visiting functional HOAs, documenting their best practices, showing that community governance could work without tyranny. In Portland, he found an HOA that used dues to fund free childcare for working parents. In Detroit, an association that had transformed abandoned lots into community gardens. In Miami, an HOA that provided hurricane preparedness for all residents, regardless of their ability to pay. "These are what HOAs should be," Nathan said in a nationally televised address. "Not tools of control, but expressions of community." The tide began to turn. Morrison's martyrdom lost its power as people saw alternatives to his vision. The autonomous zones disbanded. Federal oversight was replaced with reform state regulations that prevented the worst abuses while preserving community autonomy. 6 months later, Nathan stood in a packed congressional hearing room, testifying before a committee investigating the HOA crisis. "What we uncovered wasn't just corruption," he said. "It was an attempt to subvert American democracy from within, using our own community organizations against us. But what we also discovered was the resilience of American communities. When given the chance, people choose cooperation over control, community over conspiracy." Mr. Hayes. The committee chair asked, "What do you recommend going forward?" "Transparency, term limits, and resident bill of rights for all HOAs. No association should have the power to destroy someone's life over the height of their grass or the color of their mailbox. But we also shouldn't destroy these organizations entirely. Reformed, they can be valuable tools for community building." The reforms passed unanimously. The Homeowner Association Transparency and Accountability Act, quickly dubbed Nathan's Law, became the model for community governance reform worldwide. But Nathan's war wasn't quite over. One name from Morrison's network had never surfaced: the person who'd actually killed his mother in 1995. The answer came from Rebecca Fitzgerald, who reached out from witness protection. "I found something in my mother's papers," she said over a secure line. An invoice from 1995. Payment to a mechanic named Carl Brennan for special modifications to a Honda Civic, your mother's car. Carl Brennan was 73, living in a nursing home in Florida, dying of cancer. Nathan visited him alone. "I know what you did," Nathan said simply. Brennan looked at him with clouded eyes. "You're the Hayes boy. You killed my mother. I cut brake lines. Morrison paid me $5,000. I've regretted it every day since." "Why?" "I was desperate. My wife was sick, needed treatment. Morrison offered money." Brennan coughed, specks of blood on his lips. "I found out later your mother was investigating HOA corruption. She was getting close to exposing them. And my father. That was all Margaret. Morrison provided the plan, but she executed it. She enjoyed it." Brennan closed his eyes. "I'm dying, Mr. Hayes. Lung cancer. Few weeks left at most. I've written it all down, had it notarized. My confession. It's yours if you want it." Nathan took the confession but felt no satisfaction. Brennan was already serving a death sentence. As he left the nursing home, his phone rang. It was Dorothy Kim. "Nathan, you need to come home. Something wonderful has happened." He returned to Willowbrook Ranch to find the entire community gathered in his grandmother's garden. New roses were blooming, hundreds of them, in every color imaginable. "We all planted them," Linda explained. "One for every family Morrison and Margaret drove away. They're coming back, Nathan. The families are returning." Over the following weeks, the exodus reversed. The Johnsons returned from Oklahoma. The Parks from New Mexico. Even Tom Bradley's son, who'd vowed never to return, came back to reclaim his childhood home. The community that Margaret had tried to destroy was being reborn stronger than before. Nathan stood before the next HOA meeting, properly run, fully transparent, with rotating board members and published minutes. "We've been through hell," he said. "We've faced corruption, conspiracy, even murder, but we survived. More than that, we've shown the entire country that communities can govern themselves fairly, transparently, and with respect for everyone's rights." "What happens now?" someone asked. "Now we live," Nathan replied. "We tend our gardens, help our neighbors, and never forget that community is about lifting each other up, not tearing each other down." That evening, Nathan visited his parents' graves. Someone had planted roses around both headstones, the Irish heritage roses his grandmother had loved. "We got them, Mom, Dad," he said quietly. "Morrison, Margaret, the whole network. It cost us everything, but we got them." The wind rustled through the roses, and for a moment Nathan could swear he heard his father's voice on the breeze. "I'm proud of you, son." A year later, Nathan published his memoir, The HOA Wars: How America's Communities Fought Back Against Tyranny. It became a bestseller, required reading in law schools and public administration programs. But Nathan didn't care about fame or book sales. He cared about the email he received from a homeowner in Ohio. "Your story gave us the courage to reform our HOA. Thank you." Then another from California. Then Texas. Then New York. Thousands of communities reforming, choosing transparency over tyranny. The final victory came when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Bradley v. Willowbrook Ranch HOA, establishing that HOAs could not supersede constitutional rights, that due process applied to all violation proceedings, and that discrimination through selective enforcement was a federal crime. Nathan watched the decision from his porch. Dorothy and Linda beside him toast glasses of sweet tea raised in celebration. "Your grandfather would be so proud," Dorothy said. "He always said this land would outlast any tyrant." Nathan looked out over Willowbrook Ranch, his home, his community, his battlefield turned into hallowed ground. Children played in the streets. Neighbors chatted over fences. Gardens grew wild and beautiful, unregulated and free. "He was right," Nathan said. "He was right about everything. The war was over. The HOAs had been reformed. Justice had been served." But Nathan's phone buzzed with a new message. "Mr. Hayes, I'm a homeowner in Michigan. Our HOA is trying to foreclose on elderly residents. Can you help?" Nathan smiled, already knowing his answer. The war might be over, but the fight for fair communities would never end. And Nathan Hayes, the HOA executioner, would be there for every battle. As the sun set over Willowbrook Ranch, painting the sky in shades of hope and redemption. Nathan raised his glass one more time. To communities, he said. To neighbors helping neighbors. To never letting tyrants win. To Nathan Hayes, Dorothy added, the man who saved America's neighborhoods. Nathan shook his head. We all saved them, together. And in that moment, surrounded by friends, in a community reborn from corruption's ashes, Nathan finally felt what he'd been searching for since that first night when Margaret Williams had tried to have him arrested on his own property. He was home. The story of the HOA wars would be told for generations, taught in schools, analyzed in universities. But for Nathan, it would always be simple. A man returned home to visit his grandfather's ranch and ended up exposing the largest conspiracy in American history. Sometimes the smallest actions trigger the biggest changes. Sometimes one person standing up to injustice can inspire millions to do the same. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. 5 years had passed since the HOA wars ended, and Nathan Hayes thought he could finally rest. The National HOA Oversight Division ran smoothly under his leadership with field offices in every state and a reputation that made corrupt board members think twice before abusing their power. Willowbrook Ranch had become a pilgrimage site for communities seeking to reform their associations with Dorothy Kim, giving tours and Linda Thompson running workshops on transparent governance. Nathan was reviewing quarterly reports in his home office when the call came that would drag him back into a fight he thought was finished. Mr. Hayes, this is Deputy Director Sarah Chen from the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Division. Nathan's blood chilled. Sarah Chen, Agent Chen's daughter, who'd joined his team years ago, had moved up quickly through the ranks. If she was calling from that division, something serious was happening. What's wrong, Sarah? We have a situation. You remember Morrison's mention of sleeper cells. Foreign agents embedded in HOAs. We rooted them out. We thought we did, but we've discovered something worse. They weren't just gathering intelligence, they were preparing for activation. We've intercepted communications suggesting a coordinated attack on American infrastructure through HOA-controlled communities. Nathan stood up, his peaceful morning shattered. What kind of attack? Simultaneous failures of water systems, power grids, communication networks, all in HOA-governed communities. The damage would affect 40 million Americans instantly. When? July 4th, Independence Day, maximum symbolic impact. It was June 15th. They had less than 3 weeks. Nathan immediately convened an emergency meeting of his old team. Elena Martinez had become Attorney General of Texas, but flew in immediately. Rivera had retired but came out of retirement for this. Even Robert Williams, now 80, and frail, insisted on helping. How did we miss this? Elena asked as they gathered in the federal building's secure conference room. Sarah pulled up classified documents on the screen. The sleeper agents we caught were decoys. The real network was deeper, more patient. They've been placing people in critical positions for 15 years. HOA board members who also happen to work for utility companies, water treatment plants, telecommunications firms. It's brilliant, Rivera admitted grimly. Use HOA positions to gain community trust, then leverage that into infrastructure access. Nathan studied the intelligence reports. The network was vast, over 300 identified agents across 40 states, all in positions to cause maximum damage. We can't arrest them all without tipping off the others, he said. If even one group realizes we're onto them, they'll activate early. So what do we do? Robert asked. Nathan looked at the map of threatened communities, his mind racing. We need to neutralize them all simultaneously without them knowing they've been compromised. The plan Nathan developed was audacious and required resources from every level of government. They would stage a fake HOA conference on July 3rd, mandatory attendance for all board members from affected associations. The cover story, a federal compliance workshop about new regulations. They can't refuse without looking suspicious, Nathan explained. We get them all in one place away from their targets and arrest them simultaneously. What if they don't all come? Elena asked. Then we'll know exactly who the agents are by who refuses. The logistics were staggering. Creating a believable conference, sending invitations that wouldn't raise suspicions, coordinating with local law enforcement without leaking the operation, it all had to be perfect. Nathan personally wrote the invitation using language carefully crafted to seem bureaucratic and boring while actually being legally binding. Dear board member, it read, due to recent federal legislation, your attendance is required at the National HOA Compliance Conference on July 3rd. Failure to attend will result in immediate suspension of your HOA's legal standing and personal liability for all board members. The responses came quickly. Most board members grumbled but confirmed attendance. 17 refused. Those 17 were immediately placed under surveillance. Within days, the pattern was clear. All 17 were preparing something for July 4th. Nathan decided to handle the most dangerous one personally. Marcus Joe, president of the Sunshine Valley HOA in California, who also happened to be the senior engineer at the region's main water treatment facility. Nathan arrived at Sunshine Valley on June 25th, posing as a compliance officer doing pre-conference inspections. The community looked perfect: manicured lawns, pristine homes, families playing in parks. No one suspected their HOA president was planning to poison their water supply. Marcus Joe greeted him warmly, playing the role of dedicated community servant perfectly. He was mid-40s, American-born with no accent or obvious tells. If Nathan hadn't known better, he would have seemed like the ideal board president. Mr. Hayes from the Federal Oversight Division. Nathan introduced himself using an alias. I need to review your HOA's emergency protocols. Of course, Joe said smoothly. We pride ourselves on preparedness. As Joe showed him around the community center, Nathan planted surveillance devices documenting everything. In Joe's office, he found what he was looking for: encrypted communications equipment hidden behind seemingly innocent HOA filing cabinets. That night, Nathan monitored Joe's communications from a surveillance van. At exactly midnight, Joe received a message in Mandarin: confirmation required for July 4th activation. Joe responded, Sunshine Valley ready, water treatment access confirmed, toxin in place. Nathan immediately relayed this to the FBI. They now had direct evidence of the plot, but they needed to wait. Moving too early would alert the network. The next week was torture. Nathan visited 12 more communities, each time finding more evidence of the conspiracy. In Phoenix, an agent had access to the power grid. In Dallas, another controlled cell tower maintenance. In Seattle, one was positioned to take down internet infrastructure. Each night, Nathan lay awake thinking about the millions of innocent people living in these communities unaware of the danger. Children playing in yards that would soon lose water and power. Elderly residents dependent on medical equipment that would fail. Families planning July 4th barbecues that would never happen. Dorothy Kim could tell something was wrong when Nathan returned to Willowbrook Ranch briefly. You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders, she said, bringing him her famous sweet tea. I can't talk about it, Nathan said. But Dorothy, I need you to do something for me. On July 3rd, I want you to organize a community event. Get everyone together at the community center away from their homes. Dorothy studied his face. It's happening again, isn't it? Another attack. Just trust me. July 3rd all-day event. Everyone in Willowbrook Ranch at the community center. She nodded. Consider it done. Nathan made similar arrangements in communities across the country, using his network of reformed HOA leaders to organize events that would keep residents away from potential danger zones. June 30th arrived with ominous thunderstorms across much of the country. Nathan stood in the command center they'd established, watching as pieces moved into place. 300 federal agents were positioned near their targets. Local law enforcement had been briefed on a need-to-know basis. The fake conference had been set up in a federal facility in Kansas, centrally located and easily secured. We have a problem, Sarah Chen announced. Marcus Joe just canceled his attendance. Says he has a family emergency. Nathan cursed. If Joe backed out, others might follow. I'll handle Joe personally, Nathan said. Continue with the plan for the others. He flew to California, immediately arriving in Sunshine Valley on July 1st. Joe was at the water treatment facility, and Nathan knew he couldn't wait any longer. He entered the facility with a team of FBI agents, badges, visible authority clear. Marcus Joe, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit terrorism. Joe's mask finally slipped. his face contorted with rage as he reached for something in his pocket, a dead man's switch. "One move and I release the toxin into the water supply now," Joe snarled. 50,000 people will be dead within hours. Nathan kept his hands visible, his voice calm. "You're not a killer, Marcus. You've lived in this community for 10 years. These are your neighbors." "They're not my people," Joe spat. "They're soft, weak Americans who've forgotten what struggle means. My real people understand sacrifice." "Your real people. You were born in San Francisco. You went to Berkeley. You're as American as I am." Joe laughed bitterly. "That's what you think. My parents raised me to remember where we really came from, what we owe to the homeland. This country took everything from my grandparents, and now we're taking it back." Nathan saw the fanaticism in Joe's eyes and realized conventional negotiation wouldn't work. He needed a different approach. "Your daughter goes to Sunshine Valley Elementary," Nathan said quietly. "She drinks the same water as everyone else." Joe's hand trembled slightly. "Necessary sacrifice. Really, you'd kill your own child for this cause. She would understand when she's older. She won't be older if you push that button." The standoff stretched for long seconds. Nathan could see Joe's internal struggle, the fanatic wrestling with the father. Finally, Joe's hand dropped. The FBI agents moved instantly, securing him and the device. The water treatment facility was safe, but there were still 299 other agents to stop. July 3rd dawned bright and clear. Nathan stood in the federal facility in Kansas, watching as HOA board members from across the country filed in for the conference. They looked normal: suburban mothers, retired professionals, small business owners. No one would suspect them of being foreign agents prepared to cripple America. The trap was elegant. Once inside the facility, each attendee was separated for individual compliance assessments. In reality, they were being interrogated and their biometric data checked against intelligence databases. By noon, they had identified 47 confirmed agents among the 300 attendees. The others were legitimate board members who'd been unwittingly providing cover. The arrests happened simultaneously at 12:47 p.m. 47 agents representing 4 different foreign powers were taken into custody without a single shot fired. But the real shock came during the interrogations. "There's another layer," one agent revealed under questioning. "We were just the distraction. The real attack is economic." Nathan felt his stomach drop. "What economic attack?" The agent smiled coldly. "Every HOA in America that uses Morrison Property Management software, 30,000 associations, their financial systems are compromised. On July 4th, every bank account, every reserve fund, every homeowner's payment information will be transferred offshore. $600 billion gone in 60 seconds. The room erupted in panicked activity. They had less than 24 hours to prevent the largest theft in history. Nathan immediately called the CEO of Morrison Property Management. The company had been sold after Charles Morrison's death to a consortium that nobody had properly vetted. "Who bought Morrison Property Management?" he demanded from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. The answer made his blood run cold: a shell company ultimately owned by a Chinese state-owned enterprise. "They bought the entire HOA infrastructure of America," Elena said, horror in her voice. "They have access to everything: financial data, personal information, property records." Nathan's mind raced. They couldn't shut down the system without causing panic. They couldn't alert the HOAs without tipping off any remaining agents. They needed a surgical solution. "We need to replace the software," he said suddenly. "Push an emergency update that overwrites the malicious code." "That's impossible," the FBI's cyber division chief said. "We'd need access to their servers, their code base, their distribution system." Nathan smiled grimly. "Or we'd need someone who helped design the original system." He called Robert Williams. "Robert, you worked with Margaret on the HOA management systems. Do you still have access?" Robert's voice was uncertain. "I might have some old administrator credentials. Margaret never believed in changing passwords. Can you get us into Morrison's servers?" "Give me an hour." That hour felt like a lifetime. Nathan coordinated with cybersecurity teams across the government, preparing a patch that would neutralize the economic weapon while maintaining normal operations. Robert called back. "I'm in. Margaret's old password still works on the backup servers." The cyber team worked through the night, replacing code-closing backdoors, securing financial pathways. By dawn on July 4th, they had pushed the update to every Morrison-managed HOA system. At 9 a.m., the scheduled time for the economic attack, Nathan held his breath. Nothing happened. No transfers. No theft. No economic collapse. They had stopped it. The celebration was short-lived. The president addressed the nation that evening, revealing the plot and its prevention. The revelation that HOAs had been turned into weapons against American communities sent shockwaves through society. Congress passed emergency legislation within a week, the Community Security Act, requiring background checks for all HOA board members, regular security audits of HOA management systems, and federal oversight of any HOA managing more than 100 homes. Nathan stood before a joint session of Congress, testifying about the threat they'd narrowly avoided. Homeowner associations were never meant to be tools of foreign influence or economic warfare, he said. They were meant to be expressions of community self-governance. We must protect them while ensuring they can never again be weaponized against our citizens. The reforms were sweeping. Every HOA in America had to re-register, submit to security reviews, and prove their board members were who they claimed to be. It was a massive undertaking, but necessary. Nathan personally oversaw the vetting of 10,000 associations, finding another dozen compromised boards in the process. Each discovery led to more arrests, more revelations about how deeply foreign powers had penetrated American communities. But the most shocking revelation came from Marcus Joe during his trial. "You think you've won," he said from the witness stand, "but we've already succeeded. We've made Americans afraid of their own communities, suspicious of their neighbors. The real weapon wasn't the water supply or the power grid, it was fear. And fear, Mr. Hayes, is a poison that doesn't need a delivery system." Nathan knew Joe was right. The damage to community trust would take years to repair. He returned to Willowbrook Ranch to find the community struggling with that very issue. Neighbors who'd known each other for decades now wondered who could be trusted. The community meetings that had been celebrations of transparency became tense affairs full of suspicion. "We can't let them win," Dorothy Kim said at one particularly difficult meeting. "If we stop trusting each other, they've achieved their goal without firing a shot." Nathan stood up. "Dorothy's right. Yes, there were agents among us. Yes, we were targeted, but we also stopped them, together. That's what communities do, they protect each other." Slowly, trust began to rebuild. Willowbrook Ranch instituted Know Your Neighbor programs not as surveillance, but as genuine community building. Potlucks, game nights, volunteer projects, anything to remind people that their neighbors were friends, not threats. The model spread across the country. HOAs that had been weapons were transformed into shields communities that looked out for each other while respecting privacy and rights. A year after the July 4th plot, Nathan received a visit from the president. "Mr. Hayes, we're creating a new position, Director of Community Security. Not surveillance, but genuine security through strong, transparent communities. I want you to lead it." Nathan looked out at his grandmother's garden where roses bloomed in defiant beauty. "Can I do it from here?" The president smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Willowbrook Ranch has become the model for secure communities. Run the program from here, show the country that security doesn't require sacrificing freedom." Nathan accepted transforming his grandfather's ranch into the headquarters for a new kind of national security, one based on trust, transparency, and genuine community bonds. The program trained community leaders from across the country, teaching them to recognize threats while building stronger neighborhoods. Former victims of HOA abuse became instructors. Reformed board members taught ethical governance. Even Margaret Williams in his final years contributed by creating secure, transparent management systems that couldn't be corrupted. 3 years into running the community security program, Nathan thought he'd seen every way an HOA could be corrupted. He was wrong. The call came from Portland, Oregon, where an entire neighborhood had vanished. Not the people, the legal entity. Overnight, Riverside Commons HOA had ceased to exist in any database, its properties reverting to legal limbo, its residents suddenly without valid deeds or mortgages. "It's digital erasure," explained Maya Patel, the FBI's new cybercrime specialist. "Someone hacked into county records, state databases, even federal systems. They deleted every trace of the HOA's existence." Nathan flew to Portland immediately. Riverside Commons was in chaos. 300 families couldn't prove they owned their homes. Banks were threatening foreclosure on mortgages for properties that legally didn't exist, and the city was preparing to condemn the entire area as abandoned land. He met with the former HOA president, Jennifer Walsh, a school teacher who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "We went to bed as homeowners and woke up as squatters," she said, voice breaking. "My daughter's college fund is tied to our home equity. Now we have nothing." Nathan's investigation revealed this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar digital erasures had been attempted in Houston, Miami, and Boston, though those had been caught in time. Someone was testing a new weapon, the ability to make communities legally disappear. The trail led to an unexpected source: former employees of Morrison Property Management, the company that had been at the center of the previous conspiracy. When the company was dismantled, thousands of employees had scattered. Some apparently had decided to continue Morrison's work independently. Nathan tracked down the leader of this new network to a mansion in the Hamptons, Victoria Morrison. Charles Morrison's daughter, whom everyone had assumed was uninvolved in her father's crimes. Victoria was nothing like her father. Where Charles had been grandfatherly and seemingly benign, Victoria was sharp-cold and openly hostile. She received Nathan in her home office, surrounded by monitors displaying HOA data from across the country. "Mr. Hayes," she greeted, "the man who destroyed my father." "Your father destroyed himself." "He had vision. You have bureaucracy." She gestured to her screens. "Do you know how many HOAs are failing right now? How many communities are collapsing because of your reforms? Communities are thriving without corruption. Communities are dying without strong leadership. Democracy doesn't work at the micro level. It never has." Nathan studied her setup. This wasn't just monitoring, she was actively manipulating HOA systems across the country. "You're the one erasing communities." Victoria smiled. "I'm proving a point. Without proper management, these associations cease to function. I can make them disappear or I can make them thrive. The choice is yours. You're holding communities hostage. I'm offering a service. Let me run HOAs the way my father intended, or watch them crumble." Nathan left the mansion with Victoria's threat ringing in his ears. She had given him 48 hours before she would erase another community. Back at his makeshift command center in Portland, Nathan assembled his team virtually. Elena from Texas, Rivera from retirement in Florida, Sarah Chen from DC, even Dorothy Kim from Willowbrook Ranch. "We can't give in to extortion," Elena said. "But we also can't let her destroy more communities." "Well, we need to beat her at her own game," Nathan said. "If she can erase communities digitally, we need to make them erasure-proof." The solution came from an unexpected source: blockchain technology. By creating immutable records of property ownership distributed across thousands of computers, they could make it impossible for anyone to simply delete a community's existence. Nathan worked with tech companies, government agencies, and HOA leaders to create the Community Ledger System, a blockchain-based record of every HOA, every property, every resident in America. It would take weeks to fully implement, but they started with the most vulnerable communities. Victoria noticed immediately. Her next message came through every HOA president's email in the country. "Nathan Hayes thinks he can protect you with technology, but technology is just a tool. The real power is in people, and people can be corrupted, threatened, or eliminated. Ask him what happened to his assistant." Nathan's blood ran cold. His assistant, Marcus Chen, Agent Chen's son, who'd started working with him, hadn't shown up for work that morning. The search for Marcus led to a warehouse in Baltimore, where they found him alive but traumatized. He'd been held for 12 hours, forced to provide passwords and access codes while being shown live feeds of his family's homes, their schools, their workplaces, all under surveillance by Victoria's network. "She has people everywhere," Marcus said, shaking. "HOA board members, property managers, maintenance workers. They're all feeding her information, waiting for orders." Nathan realized they weren't just fighting Victoria, they were fighting a shadow network of Morrison loyalists who'd gone underground after the original conspiracy's collapse. The war that followed was fought in courtrooms and server rooms in community centers and corporate boardrooms. Victoria's network would attack erasing records, filing false liens, declaring fraudulent violations, and Nathan's team would counter rebuilding systems exposing corruption, protecting communities. The breakthrough came from Willowbrook Ranch, of all places. Dorothy Kim, now 91, but sharp as ever, noticed something odd about her new neighbor. "He moved in last month," she told Nathan. "Says he's retired from tech, but I've seen him at his computer at all hours. And Nathan, he's been asking questions about you." Nathan investigated quietly. The neighbor, calling himself Tom Anderson, was actually Thomas Morrison, Charles Morrison's son, Victoria's brother. He'd moved to Willowbrook Ranch to spy on Nathan to find weaknesses in his operation. Instead of confronting Thomas directly, Nathan made a calculated decision. He let Thomas see exactly what he wanted him to see: the community security program's real operations, its successes, its methods. But more importantly, he let Thomas see the communities it protected, the families it helped, the lives it improved. Over several weeks, Thomas witnessed something his family's vision had never accounted for: genuine community. He saw Dorothy organizing meal trains for sick neighbors. He watched Linda Thompson teaching children to garden. He observed the monthly community meetings where every voice mattered, where decisions were made transparently, where power was truly shared. The conversion wasn't sudden. It started with small things: Thomas helping an elderly neighbor with groceries, joining a community cleanup day, attending a potluck where he was welcomed without suspicion despite being a stranger. One evening, Thomas knocked on Nathan's door. "I know you know who I am," he said simply. Nathan nodded. "Would you like to come in?" They talked through the night. Thomas revealed everything: Victoria's plans, her network structure, the locations of secret servers, the identities of corrupted board members. "Why?" Nathan asked. Thomas looked out at the community lights glowing warmly in windows where families gathered for dinner. "Because I've seen both visions now, my father's and yours. His was about control. Yours is about connection. I choose connection." With Thomas's information, Nathan launched Operation Homecoming, simultaneous raids on Victoria's operations across the country. The digital infrastructure she'd built to erase communities was seized and repurposed to protect them. Her network of corrupted board members was exposed and removed. Victoria herself was arrested at her Hamptons mansion, defiant to the end. "You think you've won again," she said as they led her away, "but the idea survives. There will always be those who believe communities need strong leadership, not weak democracy." "Maybe," Nathan replied, "but there will also always be those who fight for real community." The trial of Victoria Morrison became a referendum on the future of American communities. She was ultimately convicted of cyber terrorism, extortion, and conspiracy, receiving a 40-year sentence. But the real victory came in the aftermath. The community ledger system was fully implemented, making it impossible for anyone to digitally erase property rights. HOA governance was reformed with mandatory transparency requirements and resident bills of rights. And most importantly, communities across America began to rebuild trust. Thomas Morrison, as part of his plea agreement, worked to reform former network members, showing them what real community looked like. Many came forward voluntarily, seeking redemption rather than prosecution. Nathan returned to Willowbrook Ranch to find a celebration waiting. The community had erected a monument in the town square, not to him but to the idea of community itself. The inscription read, "In memory of all who fought for fair communities, and in hope for all who will maintain them." Standing before the monument with Dorothy, Linda, Thomas, and hundreds of neighbors, Nathan felt the weight of the journey. From that first night when Margaret Williams had tried to have him arrested through Morrison's network, the foreign agents, Victoria's digital terrorism, it had all led to this moment. "What now?" Dorothy asked. Nathan looked at the children playing in the square, at the gardens growing wild and free, at the neighbors chatting without fear of violations or fines. "Now we prove it works. Every day in every community, we prove that democracy at the micro level isn't just possible, it's essential." His phone rang. Another community in crisis, another HOA corrupted, another fight for fairness. Nathan answered it because that's what he did now. He answered the call. But he wasn't alone. Across America, in thousands of communities, people were standing up for their neighbors, demanding transparency, choosing connection over control. The HOA wars had ended, but the work of building genuine communities had just begun. As the sun set over Willowbrook Ranch, Nathan stood in his grandmother's garden, where Irish roses bloomed alongside plants from every family that had returned after Margaret's defeat. Each bloom was a small victory, a tiny rebellion against those who would use communities as weapons. Robert Williams, now in hospice care, had sent a final letter. Nathan, I spent most of my life enabling tyranny in the name of order. You've spent yours fighting for freedom in the name of community. The future belongs to your vision, not theirs. Keep fighting, but more importantly, keep building. Communities aren't destroyed by tyrants. They're abandoned by good people who stop caring. Don't let them stop caring. Nathan folded the letter carefully, placing it with the others' testimonies from victims who'd become victors, from corrupted board members who'd found redemption from communities that had discovered their own power. The war was over, but the peace required constant vigilance. Every new HOA formed was a chance to get it right. Every board election was an opportunity for transparency. Every community meeting was a small exercise in democracy. Nathan's phone buzzed with a message from the president. The Chilean government is asking for advice on preventing HOA corruption. Interested in going international? He looked at Dorothy, who smiled knowingly. Go, she said. Show the world what we've learned, but promise you'll come home. Always, Nathan said. This is home. This is what we're fighting for. As he prepared for this new chapter, Nathan reflected on the journey. A simple visit to his grandfather's ranch had unveiled a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government and the deepest roots of community life. He'd lost his parents to this fight, but he'd gained a nationwide family of communities committed to fairness, transparency, and genuine neighborly care. The HOA wars were over, but the dream of perfect communities, not through control, but through connection, lived on. And Nathan Hayes, once the HOA executioner, had become the HOA healer, showing communities around the world that governance could be fair power, could be shared, and neighbors could trust each other. In Willowbrook Ranch, children played freely, gardens grew untamed, and board meetings were celebrations of democracy rather than exercises in tyranny. It was a small victory in a small place, but it rippled outward, touching communities across continents. The revolution hadn't come with violence or upheaval. It had come with transparency, persistence, and the radical idea that communities belonged to everyone who lived in them. And in that truth, Nathan found peace.